The woman who destroyed my marriage at my own baby shower just walked into my son's dorm room, calling his new roommate her baby. Marlowe's hands froze mid-fold, a navy blue comforter bunched between her fingers. The September sunlight streaming through the window suddenly felt cold against her skin. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only stare at the doorway where Bellamy Ashford stood holding a stack of monogrammed blankets, her honey-blonde hair swept into the same careless twist she'd worn a decade ago. Same perfume too. Marlowe could smell it from across the room. Jasmine and bergamot. The scent that had clung to her husband's collar for months before she finally understood why. "Mom, this is my roommate," Thea said, completely oblivious to the earthquake happening inside his mother's chest. He gestured toward the tall boy with sandy hair who'd entered just seconds before Bellamy. "Calder Ashford. Crazy, right? We have the same last name." Calder extended his hand toward Marlowe with a polished smile. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Ashford." Mrs. Ashford. The title landed like a slap. Marlowe hadn't been Mrs. Ashford in 9 years, not since the divorce papers were signed in a courthouse downtown while Thea sat in a stroller, too young to understand why his mother was crying. But this boy didn't know that. This boy with his father's jawline and his mother's green eyes had no idea he was shaking hands with the woman his parents had betrayed. "Let me take you back, because to understand why seeing Bellamy Ashford in that dorm room nearly stopped my heart, you need to know where I came from. I grew up in Queens, a 2-bedroom apartment with radiators that clanged all winter and windows that never quite sealed out the summer heat. My mother worked double shifts as a nurse at Jamaica Hospital, coming home with swollen feet and stories about patients who reminded her to be grateful. My father was a name on my birth certificate, and nothing. He left before I could form memories of him, and my mother never spoke about him except to say he wasn't built for staying. I learned early that love was something you earned through sacrifice, through showing up, through being useful. So, when I met Stellan Ashford in a coffee shop in the village during my junior year of college, I didn't see dollar signs or family names. I saw a man who held doors open, who asked questions about my nursing classes and actually listened to the answers, who laughed at my jokes even when they weren't funny and looked at me like I was the only person in the room. He never mentioned his family's wealth, not once during those first 3 months of dating. I found out by accident when I Googled his last name after his sister called him about the foundation gala. The Ashfords owned half the commercial real estate in Manhattan. They had buildings named after them. Endowments at universities I couldn't afford to attend. Stellan was embarrassed when I confronted him about it. He said he wanted me to love him, not his trust fund. And I did love him. Desperately. Completely. But marrying into the Ashford family meant marrying into something I wasn't prepared for. Cordelia Ashford, his mother, was a woman who weaponized silence. She never raised her voice, because she didn't need to. A single raised eyebrow could make you feel 2 inches tall. She inspected me the way you'd inspect a piece of furniture someone brought home from a garage sale. Functional, perhaps, but certainly not what she would have chosen. Every family dinner came with quiet scrutiny, the way I held my fork. The colleges I didn't attend, the career I was pursuing instead of abandoning to become a proper Ashford wife. I spent 3 years trying to prove I belonged at that table. 3 years of swallowing my pride and smiling through backhanded compliments. To understand that dorm room, we have to go back to the day I thought everything in my life was finally perfect. My baby shower. The morning of my baby shower, Stellan woke me with a kiss on my forehead. "You look beautiful," he whispered, his hand resting on my belly where our son was already kicking. 34 weeks pregnant, and I felt anything but beautiful. Swollen ankles, stretch marks mapping new territory across my hips, dark circles under my eyes from nights spent worrying about whether I would be a good mother. But when Stellan looked at me like that, I believed him. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," I admitted. "Your mother planned this entire thing. I don't even know who half the guests are." He kissed me again, softer this time. "Just be yourself, that's all you have to do." His phone buzzed on the nightstand. He glanced at it, and something shifted in his expression. Just for a second, a flicker of something I couldn't name before he silenced it and turned back to me with that same warm smile. "We should get ready," he said. "Don't want to be late to your own party." I didn't ask about the phone. I wish I had. The drive to Greenwich took 45 minutes, and with each passing mile marker, my chest grew tighter. Cordelia's estate sat at the end of a private drive lined with oak trees that had been standing since before my grandmother was born. The house wasn't a house. It was a statement. 12,000 square feet of white stone and black shutters, with gardens manicured by a team of professionals who arrived every Tuesday at dawn. Stellan helped me out of the car, and I smoothed the front of my pale blue dress, the one Cordelia's stylist had suggested after declaring my first choice a bit casual for the occasion. The foyer smelled like lilies and money. White roses exploded from crystal vases on every surface. A string quartet played softly from somewhere deeper in the house, and women in designer dresses floated past with champagne flutes and practiced smiles. Cordelia appeared within seconds, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her cream-colored suit perfectly pressed. "Marlowe, darling." She air-kissed both my cheeks. "Pregnancy suits you, though I wish you'd let me send someone for your makeup. I know a wonderful artist who works with expecting mothers. Translation: you look tired, and it shows." "Thank you for hosting this, Cordelia," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Everything looks incredible. Well, one does what one can for family." Family. The word sounded foreign coming from her lips, like she was trying on a coat that didn't quite fit. Stellan squeezed my hand and disappeared to greet his cousins, leaving me alone in a sea of women who knew each other from charity boards and tennis clubs. I wanted nothing more than a stable future for the baby growing inside me, a family that felt like home instead of a performance. So I smiled. I made small talk. I pretended I couldn't hear the whispers. An hour into the shower, I escaped to the bar for a glass of sparkling water. The women had been gossiping about me within earshot, their voices carrying across the garden terrace. She was a nursing student when they met, you know. Cordelia must have been devastated. Well, at least the baby will have the Ashford name. That counts for something. I gripped my glass tighter and focused on breathing. In, out, smile. These people would be in my child's life. I had to make this work. That's when she appeared beside me. Bellamy was the kind of beautiful that made other women feel invisible. Honey blonde hair cascading over tanned shoulders, green eyes that sparkled with amusement at some private joke, a silk dress that probably cost more than my first car, worn like it was nothing special. She ordered a champagne, took a sip, and wrinkled her nose. "God, this is terrible. You'd think with all the Ashford money they could spring for decent champagne." She glanced at me sideways. "But I suppose the point isn't to drink it. The point is to be seen holding it." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. "You're the guest of honor," she continued. "Marlowe, right?" "I'm Bellamy, old friend of the family." She extended her hand, and I shook it. Her grip was firm, her smile knowing. "Having fun?" she asked. "It's overwhelming," I admitted. "I don't know most of these people." Bellamy laughed, low and conspiratorial. "Let me help you then." She nodded toward a woman in a red dress by the rose bushes. "Patricia Hendricks. Her husband embezzled from his law firm. She pretends not to know." Her gaze shifted to a pair of women near the gift table. The Whitmore sisters absolutely despise each other. Only speak at events where photographers might be present. I found myself laughing, despite the anxiety in my chest. "You know everyone's secrets," I said. "I know everyone's everythings." She took another sip of champagne, grimacing again. "It's a curse. And a gift." She turned to face me fully, those green eyes suddenly serious. "Are you genuinely happy, Marlowe? With all of this?" The question caught me off guard. No one in the Ashford circle asked questions like that. Everything was surface. Everything was performance. "I'm having a baby with the man I love," I said carefully. "That makes me happy." Bellamy smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Stellan was always the best of them, you know. Even when we were kids. Even when everything was complicated. "You knew him as a child." "Oh, I've known Stellan forever." She paused, letting the word hang between us. Our families go way back, way, way back. Before I could ask what that meant, Stellan appeared at my elbow. His hand found the small of my back, and I leaned into his warmth instinctively. "I see you've met Bellamy," he said. His voice was light, but there was something underneath it, something careful. Bellamy raised her glass in mock salute. "Just getting to know your lovely wife, Stell. She's even more charming than you described." Stell. The nickname landed between them like a secret handshake. Stellan's hand tensed against my back for just a fraction of a second before relaxing again. "We should mingle," he said to me. "My mother wants to introduce you to some of her board members." "Of course." I turned to Bellamy. "It was nice meeting you." Bellamy's smile widened. "Oh, we'll be seeing a lot more of each other. I have a feeling." She raised her glass once more as Stellan guided me away, and I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched, of being weighed and measured for something I didn't yet understand. "Now I want to ask you something. What would you do if a gorgeous old friend seemed a little too familiar with your husband at your own baby shower? Would you confront them directly, demanding answers right there among the champagne and roses? Would you ignore it completely, convincing yourself you were being paranoid? Or would you start quietly investigating, collecting clues like puzzle pieces until you could see the full picture? Drop your answer in the comments below, because what comes next in this story shows exactly what happens when you choose to trust instead of question. The afternoon stretched on with more small talk and carefully curated smiles. Gift after gift piled onto the table draped in white linen. Silver rattles, cashmere blankets, a bassinet that cost more than 6 months of my old apartment's rent, but I couldn't focus on any of it. My eyes kept drifting across the garden, searching for honey-blonde hair and a knowing smile. Bellamy had vanished after our conversation at the bar, and so had Stellan. At first, I told myself it was nothing. He was networking with his uncle, discussing business with one of his mother's foundation donors. The Ashfords always conducted family events like corporate mergers, so his absence wasn't unusual. But 20 minutes passed, then 30. Cordelia appeared at my side with a tight smile. "Where has my son disappeared to?" "The photographer wants family portraits before the light changes." "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I thought he was with your brother." Her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Find him, would you? We're on a schedule." I handed my sparkling water to a passing server and made my way toward the house. The terrace doors were propped open, and the sound of the string quartet faded as I stepped inside. The hallway was cool and quiet. My heels clicked against marble floors as I passed the formal living room, the library, the study where Cordelia conducted her charity meetings. I checked the kitchen, empty except for the catering staff. I checked the downstairs bathroom. Nothing. Maybe he went upstairs to take a call, I reasoned. Maybe the reception was better up there. The staircase curved upward beneath a crystal chandelier that probably cost more than my nursing school tuition. I climbed slowly, one hand on the railing, the other resting on my belly. At the top of the stairs, the hallway split in 2 directions. To the left, guest bedrooms. To the right, Cordelia's private wing and the room that used to be Stellan's childhood bedroom. He'd shown it to me once, shortly after we got engaged. Model airplanes on the shelves, rowing trophies from prep school, a window seat overlooking the gardens. I turned right. The door to his old room was closed but not latched. A sliver of light spilled through the gap. And then I heard it. Laughter, low and intimate. The kind of laughter shared between people who knew each other in ways that didn't require explanation. My hand trembled as I pressed my palm against the door. It swung open silently. Stellan stood by the window seat, his back to me. Bellamy faced him, her hand resting on his chest, her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt. They weren't kissing. It was somehow worse than that. The way she looked at him, the way he leaned into her touch like it was familiar, like it was home. "We can't keep doing this," Stellan was saying. "She's having my baby. It's different now." Bellamy tilted her head, that knowing smile curving her lips. "Is it though? You said that when you got engaged. You said it on your wedding night when you called me from the bathroom. You'll say it again in 6 months. Bellamy." "Stell." She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. We both know how this works. We've always known. Marlo is lovely. She'll be a wonderful mother. But she's not me. She'll never be me. My gasp escaped before I could stop it. They both turned. Stellan's face drained of color. Bellamy's expression shifted into something that almost looked like satisfaction. Marlo. Stellan stepped toward me, his hands raised like I was a wounded animal he might spook. This isn't what it looks like. The oldest lie in the history of lies. Her hand was on your chest, I heard myself say. You were talking about your wedding night, about calling her from the bathroom. On our wedding night, let me explain. Explain what? My voice cracked. That you've been sleeping with her the entire time? That everything we built was a joke to you? Bellamy had the audacity to look bored. She examined her manicure while my world collapsed. I'm going to give you two some privacy, she said, moving toward the door. As she passed me, she paused, leaned in close enough that I could smell that jasmine and bergamot perfume. He'll choose me eventually, she whispered. They always do. And then she was gone, her heels clicking down the hallway while I stood frozen in the doorway of my husband's childhood bedroom, 34 weeks pregnant with his child. I don't remember walking down the stairs. One moment I was standing in that doorway, Stellan's excuses washing over me like white noise. The next I was in the garden again, the string quartet playing something soft and romantic, while 50 women in designer dresses sipped champagne and admired onesies embroidered with my son's name. Thayer James Ashford. We'd chosen it together, lying in bed one night, my head on his chest, his hand tracing circles on my belly. He said Thayer was a family name, and James was for my grandfather, a blend of both our histories. Now I wondered if Bellamy had been texting him while we picked out baby names. Cordelia intercepted me at the edge of the terrace. There you are. The photographer is waiting. Where is Stellan? Upstairs. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. With Bellamy. Something flickered across Cordelia's face. Recognition, not surprise. She knew. Of course she knew. Marlo, darling. Let's not make a scene. She gripped my elbow with manicured fingers, steering me toward a quiet corner of the garden. Whatever you think you saw, I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. He's been having an affair the entire time we've been together. She just told me he called her from the bathroom on our wedding night. Cordelia's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. Bellamy Wentworth has been circling my son since they were teenagers. It's an infatuation, nothing more. He married you. He's having a child with you. That's what matters. That's what matters. I pulled my arm free. He's sleeping with another woman. Lower your voice. Her words came out sharp as cut glass. There are 50 guests on that lawn who will spend the next month dissecting everything they witness here today. Do you want your son to enter this world surrounded by scandal? My son. My son, who was currently kicking against my ribcage, completely unaware that his family was crumbling before he even arrived. Stellan appeared at the terrace doors, his face pale, his tie slightly loosened. He scanned the garden until he found me, then started walking over with the determined stride of a man about to deliver a performance. Marlo, please. He reached for my hand, and I stepped back, like his touch might burn. Can we talk about this, privately? You've had months to talk privately. Years, apparently. You chose to spend that time with her instead. It's complicated. No. I shook my head, feeling something shift inside my chest. Something that had been naive and trusting finally hardening into something else. It's actually very simple. You made vows. You broke them. Repeatedly, the string quartet stopped playing. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward us. Cordelia stepped between us with the practiced ease of a woman who had managed worse crises. Everyone, please, continue enjoying the party. My daughter-in-law is feeling overwhelmed. Pregnancy hormones, you understand? Pregnancy hormones. She was reducing my heartbreak to biology, making me small so her son could remain blameless. Bellamy stood at the edge of the crowd, champagne in hand, watching me with those knowing green eyes. Like she was waiting to see what I would do. Like this was entertainment. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the gift table and watch silver rattles scatter across the manicured lawn. Instead, I turned to Stellan one final time. "I'm leaving. I'm taking my son, and I'm leaving. Don't follow me." I walked away from my baby shower, away from the roses and the champagne and the women who would gossip about this moment for years. Behind me, I heard Cordelia already spinning the narrative. She's simply exhausted. First pregnancy, you know how it is. Stellan, darling, call her a car. But I was already calling my own. The weeks that followed exist in my memory as a series of snapshots. A rented apartment in Brooklyn, because I couldn't face going back to the townhouse Stellan and I had shared. Boxes of baby supplies delivered by neutral parties since I refused to see anyone with the Ashford name. Divorce papers drafted by a lawyer my nursing school friend recommended. A woman who specialized in high-asset cases and didn't flinch when I told her about the Ashford fortune. Stellan called constantly, left voicemails that ranged from apologetic to angry to desperately pleading. "Marlo, we can work through this. Couples recover from worse. Marlo, you're being unreasonable. Think about the baby. Marlo, please. I love you. I made mistakes, but I love you." I deleted every single one. Cordelia's calls were less frequent, but more strategic. She offered money, access to the best doctors, a brownstone in the village if I would just be reasonable and present a united front for the child's sake. "Ashford children are raised as Ashfords," she said during our one conversation. "Whatever happened between you and Stellan, my grandson will know his legacy. Your grandson will know the truth," I replied, "when he's old enough to understand it." Thea was born on a Tuesday in October. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair and his father's grey eyes. Stellan wasn't in the delivery room. He'd wanted to be, had begged to be, but I couldn't look at him without seeing Bellamy's hand on his chest. He met his son 3 days later in a supervised visit arranged by our lawyers. I watched through the window as he held Thea for the first time, tears streaming down his face. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with in that coffee shop, the one who held doors and asked questions and looked at me like I was enough. But that man had been a performance, and I was done applauding. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. I kept my apartment, a modest settlement, and full custody with visitation rights for Stellan every other weekend. Cordelia fought the custody arrangement viciously, but even Ashford money couldn't erase what had happened at that baby shower. 50 witnesses had seen me walk away in tears. The story had spread through Greenwich like wildfire. Bellamy, I learned later, had been Stellan's first love. They'd dated in high school before his family sent him abroad for college. She'd married someone else, divorced, returned to their social circle right around the time Stellan and I got engaged. He'd never stopped loving her. He'd just been too cowardly to choose. For 10 years, I built a life that didn't include Stellan Ashford. I finished my nursing degree, worked my way up to nurse practitioner, bought a small house in a neighborhood where nobody knew the Ashford name or cared about Greenwich scandals. Thea grew into a brilliant, curious boy who loved science and soccer, and asking questions I didn't always know how to answer. "Why doesn't Dad live with us? Why does Grandma Cordelia's house have so many rooms? Why do you get quiet when someone mentions baby showers?" I answered honestly when I could, and deflected when honesty would hurt him. Stellan remained in Thea's life, every other weekend, as ordered. He remarried briefly, a woman I never met, then divorced again. Bellamy's name appeared in society columns occasionally, linked to various wealthy men, but never to Stellan. I'd assumed their affair had ended when our marriage did. I was wrong. Thea received his acceptance letter to Meridian Academy the spring of his freshman year. It was the kind of school that didn't just educate children. It molded them, connected them, opened doors that would stay open for the rest of their lives. Stellan had offered to pay tuition, and after a long negotiation, I'd agreed. Whatever happened between us, I wouldn't let my pride limit my son's future. But I should have read the enrollment paperwork more carefully. I should have asked who selected the roommate assignments. I should have wondered why Cordelia suddenly seemed so interested in her grandson's education. Because Cordelia Ashford hadn't become powerful by leaving things to chance. She'd built her empire through strategy and patience, and a willingness to play games that lasted decades. And now, standing in that dorm room, staring at Bellamy and her son, I realized I'd walked directly into her latest move. Bellamy's smile hadn't changed in 10 years. Same knowing curve. Same hint of amusement at some private joke. She looked at me across that cramped dorm room like we were old friends reuniting at a party instead of enemies meeting on an unexpected battlefield. Marlowe. She said my name like a greeting and a challenge all at once. It's been too long. Thayer and Calder were arranging posters on the wall, completely oblivious to the history filling the space between their mothers. You two know each other? Thayer asked, barely glancing over his shoulder. We've met, I said carefully. A long time ago. Bellamy set her stack of blankets on Calder's bed. Our families go way back. Way, way back. The same words she'd used at my baby shower. The same casual dismissal of everything that phrase contained. Mom, did you know Calder's dad went to Meridian too? Thayer pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. Same dorm building and everything. Maybe they knew each other. Ashford isn't that common a name. Calder laughed. My dad says this place hasn't changed since his day. Same traditions, same rooms, same legacy families sending their kids. Legacy families. The phrase hung in the air. I looked at Bellamy, and understanding clicked into place like a key turning in a lock. Calder was Stellan's son, not through Bellamy's brief marriage to some other wealthy man. Through the affair that had never really ended. The sandy hair I'd noticed when he walked in wasn't a coincidence. The jawline. The way he carried himself with that particular Ashford confidence. Thayer's roommate was his half-brother, and Bellamy was smiling at me like she'd been waiting 10 years for me to figure it out. We should let the boys settle in, she said smoothly. Perhaps grab coffee, catch up on old times. I don't think so. Suit yourself. She kissed Calder's cheek and gathered her designer handbag. Call me if you need anything, sweetheart. I'm staying at the Whitmore until Parents' Weekend. She paused at the door, that same jasmine and bergamot scent trailing behind her. It really is wonderful that our boys found each other, she said, loud enough for both of them to hear, almost like fate. But it wasn't fate. It was Cordelia. Cordelia, who controlled Meridian's board of trustees. Cordelia, who had been suspiciously supportive of Thayer's enrollment. Cordelia, who never did anything without calculating exactly what she would gain. She wanted her grandsons to know each other. She wanted the truth to come out, but on her terms. In her territory. And she wanted me to watch it happen without being able to stop it. That night, I sat in my hotel room 3 miles from Meridian Academy and stared at my phone. Stellan's number still existed in my contacts. I'd never deleted it because Keo parenting required communication, even when that communication was stiff and formal. My finger hovered over the call button. Did he know? Had he orchestrated this alongside his mother? Or was he just another piece on Cordelia's chessboard, moved without consent? I called him. He answered on the second ring. Marlowe? Is Thayer okay? He's fine. I took a breath. But I need you to tell me the truth about something. And for once in your life, I need you to actually tell the truth. Silence on the other end. Bellamy was at Meridian today with her son, Calder, who happens to be Thayer's new roommate. I let the words sit. Calder looks exactly like you, Stellan. He has your jaw, your walk, your everything. The silence stretched so long, I thought he'd hung up. How long have you known? I finally asked. Since he was born. His voice cracked. Bellamy told me a month before you and I finalized the divorce. She wanted me to leave you for her, to raise him together. But by then the affair was already public. I couldn't... You couldn't what? Couldn't bear more scandal. Couldn't handle your mother's disapproval. I couldn't lose Thayer. He sounded exhausted, defeated. If the court found out I had another child, another family I'd been hiding, they might have changed the custody arrangement. I might have lost visitation entirely. So, you've been hiding a son for 10 years. I've been paying support. seeing him when I could without raising suspicion. Bellamy agreed to keep it quiet until he was older. Until he was old enough to attend the same school as Thea, you mean? Until your mother could force them together. That wasn't my idea. I swear to you, Marlowe, I didn't know about the roommate assignment until you called just now. This has my mother's fingerprints all over it. For once, I believed him. Because Stellan was many things. A liar, a cheater, a coward. But he wasn't strategic. He was weak, easily manipulated. Cordelia was the one who played chess while everyone else played checkers. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I looked at the ceiling of my hotel room, thinking about Thea unpacking his belongings 3 miles away, hanging posters with his new roommate, his brother. "I'm going to protect my son," I said, "the way I've always done." I hung up before he could respond. The next morning, I drove back to Meridian Academy. Thea met me in the parking lot, his smile bright and uncomplicated. "Mom, Calder is awesome. We stayed up until 2 talking about everything. He wants to study engineering too. We're taking the same physics class." My heart cracked. He was so happy, so unaware of the landmine beneath his feet. "Thea, we need to talk." His smile faltered. "What's wrong? Is it Dad? Is someone sick?" "No one's sick." I guided him toward a bench beneath an old oak tree. "But there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you a long time ago." I told him everything. The baby shower, Bellamy, the affair that had been happening since before we were married. I told him about Calder. His face cycled through confusion, then denial, then a hurt so deep it made me want to take back every word. "So Calder is my brother? Half-brother?" "Yes. And Dad knew this whole time?" "Yes." He stood up suddenly, pacing in front of the bench. "Does Calder know?" "I don't think so. But I think someone wants both of you to find out." "Who?" "Why? Your grandmother." Thea stopped pacing. He'd always had a complicated relationship with Cordelia. He sensed her coldness even when he couldn't name it. "What do I do?" His voice was small, young. He was 14 years old and carrying a weight no 14-year-old should carry. I stood and wrapped my arms around him. He was almost as tall as me now, this boy who had once kicked inside my belly while his father made promises he'd already broken. "You don't have to do anything right now," I said. "You can take time to process this. You can be angry. You can be sad. All of it is valid. But Calder's my roommate. I have to see him every day. You could request a room change. We could handle this privately." Thea pulled back, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "But it's not his fault. He didn't know either. My son, at 14, was already more decent than his father had ever been." "No," I agreed. "It's not his fault." "Maybe." He hesitated. "Maybe I should tell him, before Grandma does whatever she's planning. At least that way we control it." I looked at my son, this boy who had survived a broken home and absent weekends and questions I couldn't answer. He was right. The only way to beat Cordelia at her own game was to stop playing by her rules. 3 weeks later, Thea and Calder sat across from Cordelia Ashford in her Greenwich study. I stood in the doorway, watching. Bellamy was there too, looking less satisfied than she had in that dorm room. The boys had told her the night before, and according to Thea, she'd cried. Real tears, apparently. Tears for her son, who now knew his entire childhood had been built on secrets. Cordelia, predictably, showed no emotion at all. "I don't understand why you're upset," she said coolly. "You're brothers. This should be a gift." "A gift you forced on us," Calder spoke up. His voice was stronger than I expected. "You arranged for us to room together. You wanted us to find out this way. I wanted you to find each other. The method was irrelevant." "The method was manipulation," Thea said. "Like everything you do." Cordelia's eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone, young man. I am still your grandmother, and she's still my mother." Thea pointed at me. "The one you tried to humiliate at her own baby shower. The one who raised me alone while Dad funded his secret second family." Stellan, sitting in the corner like a ghost at his own reckoning, said nothing. Bellamy stepped forward. "Cordelia, Perhaps we should discuss this privately. There's nothing private left, Calder said. You made sure of that. The boys had bonded over their shared anger. In the weeks since the truth came out, they'd spent hours comparing notes, comparing lies they'd been told, building a relationship on the only foundation that mattered, honesty. Cordelia stood, her posture rigid. I did what was best for this family. Secrets destroy legacies. I simply accelerated the inevitable. No. I finally stepped into the room. You destroyed any trust your grandsons might have had in you. You hurt them to prove you could. I made them family. They were already family. They just didn't know it. And they should have learned the truth from their parents, not discovered it through your machinations. Cordelia's gaze could have frozen fire. You've always been too sentimental, Marlowe. Too naive. That's why you couldn't keep your husband. Maybe, but at least my son knows he can trust me. I looked at Thea, at the young man he was becoming despite everything. We're leaving, I said. Both boys are welcome to come with us. Calder hesitated, glancing at Bellamy. Go, she said quietly. I think we've all had enough Ashford hospitality for one day. We walked out of that Greenwich estate together. 2 boys who'd been strangers 3 weeks ago. 2 mothers who'd once been enemies. The drive back to Meridian was quiet, but not uncomfortable. At a rest stop, Thea turned to Calder. So, I guess we're stuck with each other now. Brothers and roommates. Calder managed a small smile. Could be worse. You could snore. I do snore. Then it's already worse. They both laughed, and something loosened in my chest. Here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just break your heart. It rewrites every memory you ever trusted. Every moment you thought was real becomes suspicious. Every I love you becomes a question instead of an answer. But sometimes, out of that wreckage, something unexpected grows. Thea and Calder became inseparable. They chose each other as brothers in a way that defied everything Cordelia had intended. She wanted to control the narrative. They rewrote it entirely. Stellan eventually started attending family therapy. Not with me. That bridge was too burned to rebuild. But with both his sons, learning how to be honest with them, even when honesty meant admitting he'd failed. Bellamy and I will never be friends. But we've reached an understanding. Our sons matter more than our history. So, we coexist. We communicate when necessary. We keep our distance otherwise. And Cordelia? She still hosts her charity galas, still controls her boards and her foundations, but her grandsons rarely attend. They've built their own version of family, one that doesn't require her approval. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply walking away, building a life that doesn't include the people who tried to break you. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to rebuild after someone shattered your trust, then you know why these stories matter. They remind us we're not alone. They show us that survival is possible. If you're new here, welcome to our community. We share stories about real relationships, real betrayals, and the real strength it takes to start over. If that sounds like something you need, hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And drop a like if this story moved you. It helps more than you know. Because somewhere out there, someone else is standing in their own dorm room doorway. Someone else just discovered that the past they tried to outrun has finally caught up. And maybe hearing this story will remind them that they'll survive it too. Until next time. The years that followed settled into an uncomfortable rhythm. I finished my nursing degree while working night shifts at Mount Sinai. Rachel watched Thea when I had classes, and I paid her back by covering her rent when her hours got cut. We survived on coffee and stubbornness, and the kind of friendship that forms when you're both too broke and too tired to pretend life is easy. Stellan paid child support. On time. I'll give him that. The Ashford lawyers made sure the money transferred like clockwork every month. But money wasn't the same as showing up. He'd take Thea for his scheduled weekends, then cancel the next 2. He'd promise to come to birthday parties, then send expensive gifts instead with notes about unavoidable conflicts. Cordelia remained a constant, cold presence. She insisted on seeing Thea once a month, supervised visits at her Greenwich estate where she'd dress him in clothes she'd purchased and photograph him for the family archives like he was a museum piece she was cataloguing. I let it happen because the custody agreement required it, because fighting Cordelia meant lawyer fees I couldn't afford, because sometimes you have to lose small battles to win the larger war. Thea started asking questions around age 4. Why doesn't Daddy live with us? Why does Grandma's house have so many rooms but no toys? Why do you get sad when I come home from Daddy's? I answered honestly when I could. Your father and I weren't good together, but we both love you. Grandma shows love differently than I do. I'm not sad, sweetheart. I just missed you. The lies we tell to protect our children from truths they're too young to carry. When Thea turned 6, I'd saved enough for a down payment on a small house in a neighborhood where nobody knew the Ashford name. 2 bedrooms, a backyard barely big enough for a swing set, a mortgage that stretched my budget to breaking. But it was ours. Stellan showed up the day we moved in, looking around at the modest rooms with something like pity in his eyes. I could help you find something bigger, he offered. Somewhere safer. This is safe, and it's ours. Marlo, you don't have to struggle like this. The family has resources. I'm not struggling. I'm building a life that doesn't require Ashford approval. He left without arguing. That was Stellan's way. Conflict, avoidance, masquerading as respect. I worked my way up to nurse practitioner, took extra shifts, saved aggressively, built a life where Thea could have stability even if he couldn't have wealth. And slowly, year by year, I stopped checking my phone hoping Stellan would change. Stopped expecting him to become the father Thea deserved. I became both parents instead. The science fair projects were mine. The soccer practices, the scraped knees and bad dreams, and questions about why some families looked different than others. Stellan remained a peripheral presence, the weekend dad who showed up occasionally with guilt gifts and promises about spending more time together soon. By the time Thea was 10, he'd stopped asking when Daddy was coming. He'd learned to expect disappointment and protect himself accordingly. It broke my heart every single time. I didn't see Bellamy for years after the divorce. She'd disappeared from the social pages for a while. Married someone, a venture capitalist, I heard through the grapevine of nurses who followed celebrity gossip during lunch breaks. I didn't follow her life, didn't want to know if she and Stellan were still involved or if that fire had finally burned itself out. Then Thea came home from a weekend at Stellan's when he was 8 years old and mentioned a woman. Daddy's friend came over. She brought cookies, the fancy kind with the gold wrapper. My stomach dropped. What was her name? Belle something. She said I could call her Miss Bell. I called Stellan that night after Thea was asleep. You're introducing our son to her? Marlo, it's not what you think. What is it then? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're parading your mistress in front of our child. She's not my mistress. We're not together. She's just a friend who happened to stop by. A friend who you had an affair with for years. A friend who helped destroy our marriage. That was a long time ago. Not long enough. Silence on his end. Then, quietly, I can't erase her from my life completely. Our families are still connected. She's still part of the social circle. Then see her at galas and charity dinners, not during your parenting time. To his credit, he agreed, or claimed to. But I learned later, much later, that Bellamy never really left. She was always there in the background. At family events, Stellan brought Thea too. At Cordelia's holiday parties, never front and center but present, watching. And according to what Stellan finally admitted years afterward, they'd never completely ended things. They'd break up for months at a time. Stellan would date other women, appropriate women his mother approved of for public consumption. He'd even remarried briefly, a merger marriage that lasted 14 months before dissolving quietly. But he always went back to Bellamy. She was the constant in his otherwise carefully managed life. And apparently, somewhere in those years of on-again, off-again entanglement, Bellamy got pregnant. I didn't know about Calder's existence until that day at Meridian Academy. Stellan had hidden his second son the same way he'd hidden everything else. Quietly, carefully, with enough plausible deniability that he could claim ignorance if the truth ever surfaced. Bellamy had married someone else shortly after getting pregnant. A brief marriage that gave Calder a legal father on paper and kept the Ashford scandal from reigniting. She'd raised her son in the same social circles as Stellan, close enough that Cordelia knew. Close enough that the resemblance must have been obvious to anyone paying attention. But the Ashfords were good at keeping secrets. They'd had generations of practice. As Thayer got older, his questions got harder. "Mum, why does Dad always promise to come to my games and then cancel? Why does Grandma Cordelia ask about my grades but never about my friends? Why do people at Dad's parties look at me weird when I tell them I live in Brooklyn?" I tried to shield him from the class differences, from the judgment implicit in every interaction with the Ashford side of his family. But children aren't stupid. By the time Thayer was 12, he'd figured out that his life with me looked nothing like his life with Stellan, that the house where he slept most nights was modest compared to the penthouse apartment his father maintained, that my used Honda was not the same as Cordelia's driver and town car. "Do you wish we had more money?" he asked me once, out of nowhere, while we were making dinner. "I wish I could give you everything you deserve," I answered honestly. "But money isn't the same as love, and you have all of my love, every bit." "I know, Mom." He hugged me, and for a moment he was small again, my baby boy who used to fall asleep on my chest while I studied nursing textbooks. "I like our house. I like our life, even though it's different from Dad's. Especially because it's different." He said it with the conviction of a child who didn't yet understand how complicated the world would become. But I held onto those words during the hard moments, during the times when I worried I wasn't enough, when I questioned whether fighting for custody had been selfish. Thayer chose me. Every day, in small ways, he chose our life over the one the Ashfords could have given him. When the acceptance letter from Meridian Academy arrived, I almost didn't let him apply. Meridian was everything I'd fought against. Old money, legacy admissions, the kind of place where your last name mattered more than your transcript. But Thayer wanted it. He'd researched their engineering program, talked to alumni, convinced himself that this was the path to the future he wanted, and Stellan offered to pay tuition without me having to ask. "He's an Ashford," Stellan said during one of our rare phone conversations. "He deserves an Ashford education." I hated that logic, hated the implication that my son needed the family name to succeed. But I also knew that turning down the opportunity because of my pride would hurt Thayer more than it would hurt Stellan. So I agreed. I signed the enrollment papers, helped Thayer pack for freshman orientation, drove him to campus with a trunk full of second-hand furniture and a heart full of worry. And then I walked into his dorm room and came face to face with the past I thought I'd escaped. The first night after discovering Calder's identity was the longest night of my life. I sat in that hotel room 3 miles from Meridian Academy and replayed every interaction I'd had with the Ashford family over the past 14 years, looking for clues, for signs that I'd missed. Cordelia's unexpected interest in Thayer's education suddenly made sense. Stellan's insistence on paying tuition without negotiation made sense. The roommate assignment that put 2 boys with the same last name together made perfect, terrible sense. I called my lawyer at 7 in the morning. "Can they do this?" I asked without preamble. "Can they manipulate a school placement to force the boys together?" She sighed. Marlo Ashford calling at dawn was apparently not a surprise anymore. If Cordelia sits on Meridian's board, which I'm guessing she does, then yes, technically, though proving it would be nearly impossible. So I have no recourse. You could request a room change. Remove Thayer from the situation before it escalates. That punishes him for something he didn't do. I know. But the alternative is watching this play out on Cordelia's terms. I thanked her and hung up. Then I drove back to Meridian before I could talk myself out of it. Thayer was at breakfast when I found him, sitting in the dining hall with Calder, both of them laughing about something on Calder's phone. 2 boys who looked enough alike that anyone paying attention would have questions. Same dark hair, same build, same unconscious gestures when they talked. I waited until Thayer noticed me standing in the doorway. His smile faded. "Mom? What are you doing here? I thought you drove home last night." I stayed nearby. We need to talk. Calder stood politely. I can give you guys privacy. Actually, I said carefully, this involves you too. We found an empty study room off the main library. Quiet. Private. The kind of space where secrets could be spoken aloud without witnesses. Both boys sat across from me, confusion written on their faces, and I told them everything. The baby shower, the affair, the years of deception. I told Thayer that his father had been lying to him about more than just cancelled weekends. I told Calder that the man he'd been told was a family friend was actually his biological father. I watched two 14-year-old boys process information that would have broken adults. Thayer went pale, silent. His hands gripped the edge of the table like he needed something solid to hold onto. Calder shook his head slowly. That's not possible. My dad is Richard Wentworth. My mom told me he died when I was 3. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. But your mother lied. Stellan is your father, has been involved in your life, just not publicly. Why would she lie about that? Because the truth was complicated. Because the Ashfords wanted it hidden. Thayer finally spoke. Does Dad know we're roommates? Not until I told him last night, but your grandmother knows. She arranged it. Why? Because Cordelia Ashford doesn't believe in secrets. She believes in control. And she wanted you both to find out this way, in her territory, on her timeline. The boys looked at each other, really looked, seeing the resemblance for the first time with context. We're brothers, Thayer said quietly. Half-brothers, Calder corrected. Then, holy shit, we're brothers. Language, I said automatically. Then realized how absurd that was given the circumstances. All 3 of us started laughing, inappropriate, slightly hysterical laughter that came from not knowing what else to do. When we finally stopped, Thayer asked the question I'd been dreading. What do we do now? I expected anger. Expected Thayer to want to transfer schools, to run from the situation the way I'd run from the Ashfords years ago. Instead, he surprised me. I want to tell him, Thayer said. I want to confront Dad before Grandma does whatever she's planning next. Calder nodded slowly. My mom needs to know I know. She's been lying to me my whole life. Are you sure? I looked between them. Once you do this, you can't take it back. Everything changes. Everything already changed, Thayer pointed out. We just didn't know it yet. He was right. The 3 of us spent the rest of that day planning, figuring out what to say and how to say it. Calder called Bellamy first. I watched from across the study room as he paced, phone pressed to his ear, his voice rising and falling with emotion I couldn't quite hear. When he finally hung up, his eyes were red. She admitted it. Said she was protecting me from a complicated situation. Said she thought it was better if I believed my dad was dead rather than know he'd chosen someone else. Chosen someone else, Thayer repeated. That's one way to describe serial infidelity, despite everything. Calder laughed. I think I'm going to like having a brother, even though our family is completely messed up, especially because our family is completely messed up. At least we're in it together now. They exchanged numbers, made plans to call Stellan together, on speakerphone, so he couldn't lie to one of them separately. I offered to leave for that conversation, but both boys asked me to stay. You're the only one who's been honest, Thayer said. We need at least one person in the room we can trust. So I stayed while they called their father. Stellan answered cheerfully. Thayer, hey, how's the first week going? It's been interesting, Dad. I'm here with someone. You're on speaker. A pause. Okay, what's going on? Hi, Mr. Ashford. Calder's voice was steady despite the tension in his shoulders. It's Calder Ashford. Your other son. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, Calder. How did you... Who told you? Does it matter? Thayer cut in. Were you ever going to tell us? Or were you just going to let us figure it out on our own? It's complicated. You keep saying that, Calder said, but it seems pretty simple from where I'm sitting. You had an affair. I was born. You hid me because it was easier than being honest. I wanted to tell you, both of you. But there were legal considerations, financial arrangements. Your mother and I agreed. Our mothers, Thea interrupted. Plural. You have 2 sons with 2 different mothers, and you've been lying to both of us. I'd never been more proud of my son than I was in that moment. Stellan tried to explain, tried to justify, tried to claim he'd been protecting them from a truth that would have been too painful. But both boys had stopped listening. We're going to see Grandma Cordelia, Thea finally said. We're going to tell her that we know, that we're not playing whatever game she's set up. Thea! Wait. No, Dad. You've had 14 years to be honest with me. I'm done waiting. He hung up. Both boys sat in silence for a moment, processing what they'd just done. Then Calder turned to me. Mrs. Ashford, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you tell us? You could have let us find out slowly, let it blow up on its own. Why warn us? I thought about that question, about all the ways this could have gone differently. Because you're both good kids who deserve better than to be pawns in someone else's manipulation. And because the only way to beat people like Cordelia is to stop playing by their rules. What if she retaliates? Thea asked. What if telling her we know makes things worse? Then we deal with it. Together. Calder smiled. I've never had family that actually meant that before. Well, I said, you do now. We drove to Greenwich that afternoon. Both boys in the back seat of my Honda, strategizing like generals preparing for battle, me in the front, wondering if I was doing the right thing or leading lambs to slaughter. Cordelia's estate looked exactly the same as it had 14 years ago. Same oak trees lining the drive, same pristine gardens, same marble foyer that smelled like money and lilies. The housekeeper showed us to the study without question. Apparently, unexpected visits from estranged family members weren't unusual in the Ashford household. Cordelia sat behind her desk, reading glasses perched on her nose, reviewing documents like she hadn't just orchestrated the emotional manipulation of 2 teenage boys. She looked up when we entered. Her expression didn't change. Marlowe, Thea, and young Calder. What an unexpected surprise. Cut the act, Cordelia, I said. We know what you did. I've done many things. You'll have to be more specific. Thea stepped forward. You arranged for Calder and me to be roommates. You wanted us to find out we're brothers. You probably planned exactly how it would happen. I simply made a suggestion to the housing committee. 2 boys with the same last name. It seemed logical to pair them. It was manipulation, Calder said. His voice shook slightly, but he held his ground. You wanted to control how we learned the truth. Cordelia set down her reading glasses. And how did you learn the truth? Did your mothers finally develop spines and tell you, or did you piece it together yourselves? Does it matter? I asked. It matters because secrets destroy families. I simply accelerated the inevitable. Better they know now than discover it in 10 years when the damage is irreparable. The damage was done when their father chose to lie, I said. And when you encouraged those lies. I encouraged Stellan to marry you because the family needed stability, needed an heir without scandal attached. Bellamy was never going to be suitable, no matter how much Stellan claimed to love her. So you used me, used my son. For your family's image, I used the resources available to ensure the Ashford legacy continued. That's what leaders do, Marlowe. They make hard choices for the greater good. The greater good. Thea's voice rose. I spent my whole life wondering why my dad didn't care enough to show up. And Calder thought his father was dead. That's not the greater good. That's just cruel. Cordelia's expression finally shifted. Something that might have been regret flickered across her face before she schooled it back to neutrality. I underestimated you both, she said quietly. I thought you'd need guidance to navigate this revelation. Instead, you came here together, united. We're brothers, Calder said simply. That means something to us. Even if it doesn't mean anything to you, it means everything to me. Cordelia stood, moving around the desk. You are both Ashfords. You carry a name with weight and history and responsibility. I wanted you to know each other, to support each other. Was my method perfect? No. But the outcome is what matters. The outcome is that we don't trust you, Thea said. Either of you. Dad or you. We know you'll lie when it's convenient. We know family means less to you than control. So what will you do? Cordelia asked. Will you leave Meridian? Refuse your inheritance? Cut ties with the family entirely? Both boys looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them. No, Thea said finally. We're going to stay at Meridian. We're going to build our own relationship without your interference. And we're going to be honest with each other, even when it's hard. And our fathers? Calder asked. What happens with them? That's up to you, I said. Both of you. You get to decide what relationship you want with Stellan, what boundaries you need. I'll support whatever you choose. Cordelia raised an eyebrow. How progressive of you, Marlo. It's called respecting their autonomy. You should try it sometime. We left before she could respond, walked out of that estate the same way I'd walked out 14 years ago. But this time I wasn't alone. This time I had my son beside me, and his brother, and the knowledge that we'd faced Cordelia Ashford together and survived. In the car, Thea asked the question I'd been expecting. Do you think she'll retaliate? Try to punish us for confronting her? Maybe, probably, but we'll handle it when it comes. Together, Calder added from the back seat. Together, I agreed. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Stellan attempted damage control, requesting family meetings and sending long emails about his regrets and his desire to do better. Bellamy called Calder daily, trying to explain decisions she'd made when he was too young to have input. Cordelia maintained her distance, but her lawyers sent letters about trust funds and inheritance conditions that couldn't be ignored. But through it all, Thea and Calder became genuinely close. They studied together, ate meals together, built inside jokes, and shared references the way brothers do when they're given the chance to actually be brothers. Thea would FaceTime me from their dorm room, and I'd see Calder in the background, both of them laughing about something stupid one of their teachers had said. Parents' weekend arrived in October. I drove up to Meridian, expecting awkwardness, expecting to navigate conversations with Stellan and Bellamy, and possibly Cordelia if she decided to make an appearance. Instead, I found something unexpected. The boys had planned the entire weekend, tours of campus on their terms, dinner at a restaurant they'd chosen, events that forced the adults to follow their lead instead of the other way around. At dinner, Thea stood up with his water glass raised. I want to make a toast, he said, to family. Not the family you're born into, but the family you choose. The people who show up even when it's hard, who tell the truth even when it's painful. He looked at me. Mom, you've been choosing me every day of my life. Thank you. Then he looked at Calder. And brother, I'm really glad we're choosing each other now. Calder raised his glass. To choosing each other. Stellan wiped his eyes. Bellamy looked uncomfortable but touched. I tried not to cry into my wine. After dinner, while the boys went to show Calder's mom something on campus, Stellan pulled me aside. I know I can't fix what I broke, he said. I know sorry isn't enough, but watching them together, seeing them build something real despite everything, I did wrong. Maybe that's the best outcome I didn't deserve. They're good kids, I agreed. Despite us, not because of us. You raised him well, Marlo. Better than I ever could have. It wasn't forgiveness. Probably would never be forgiveness. But it was acknowledgement. And sometimes that's enough. Now, if you've stayed with me this whole time, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after someone destroyed your trust? Have you ever had to look your child in the eye and explain why their other parent wasn't who you thought they were? Have you ever had to decide between protecting them from painful truths or giving them the honesty they deserve? These stories matter because they remind us we're not alone. Because somewhere out there, someone else is standing in a dorm room realizing their past just crashed into their present. Someone else is choosing between silence and truth. Someone else is learning that the only person they can truly count on is themselves. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own battles or your own strength, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Drop a like if you made it this far, because it really does help more people find these stories when they need them most. And if you want to share your own story, drop it in the comments. This community is built on honesty. on people brave enough to say this happened to me too, and remind each other that survival is possible. Until next time, remember, you are stronger than the secrets people tried to bury you with.